Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Trifecta Live. I'm so excited for our guest tonight. We have none other than Thomas Ferrario, and we're going to be talking about Marley Woods. But before we get to that, just a little reminder that throughout the show, I'm going to ask 3 questions. And if you get those 3 right, you can visit RockyMountainRanchResearch.org and answer the questions there, and I'll be sending some PDFs out to you guys. So I hope that you participate. It's just kind of my way of saying thank you for being here. I also wanted to thank Paul and Jim for their kind donations. It helped me get a hotspot, and I was really hoping, fingers crossed, that it would help with our glitches in our videos tonight. But I can already see we're glitching a little bit, so I might have to take even further action. The Starlink is just not getting the up speeds that I would like to run this smoothly here. It's only with StreamYard too. It seems I don't have this problem with other platforms, but we'll get it straightened out. So I hope you bear with me as we kind of get these glitches ironed out. What other announcements do I have? Oh, we now have a Patreon. And of course, any help would be very great. I'll be very grateful for that, as it helps us kind of get these glitches out of here. It's really frustrating for me to see that this is happening again. We added a hotspot and here we are. But anyway, let's just get right to it. I'm so excited to have our guest, Thomas Ferrario. He is here to talk about the infamous Marley Woods out there in Missouri. I know he's great friends with Debbie Ziegelmeyer, who is a good friend of mine too. We worked hard with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, and I can't wait to talk all things high-strangeness with Tom. So let's just bring him on in here.
Hello, good to be here.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you so much. Do you like to go by Thomas or Tom?
Tom's fine. Tom's fine.
Okay. It's a great name. That is my dad's name, by the way, Thomas. He was a Thomas.
Oh, wow.
So he went by both as well. I am so happy you are on the show. I like talking about the trifecta, and kind of where I really want to start with you is so many of us, especially within MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network, it's kind of a nuts and bolts scientific organization. And I know the scientific method is very important to you, and it certainly was important to Ted Phillips as well. And I know you mentored under Ted Phillips, and I can't wait to kind of learn more about Ted as well. But I kind of want to talk about your process on, these high-strangeness locations, Skinwalker Ranch, Marley Woods, the Blind Frog Ranch, and all these other hot spots of high-strangeness. You kind of have to get more into the realms of paranormal and interdimensional, and kind of moves you away from the nuts and bolts. And I kind of wanted to start out with kind of a background on where you started with that and how you moved from having to kind of open up your mind into this high strangeness world that we all find ourselves in with these high strangeness locations.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. My background I live in a very rural area, and I had a background not unlike yours. I had family members had experiences. I had experiences. And over the years in a small community, you get to be the go-to guy. If they know you're going to take them seriously and listen. And of course, ridicule is no part of the scientific process, as I learned from Ted Phillips. But I will tell you that I've had so many people in my area, a little small town of about 1,000 people in the beginning. And everybody came to me, and I, at one point, thought on a Sunday morning I should get schooled on how to do it right. And I called Walt Andrus, and never thinking I'd get through to Walt, and had a 4-hour conversation with him. And he assigned me section director to MUFON and put me in touch with Bruce Whitteman in St. Louis, Missouri, the first appointed state director for MUFON. And I called Bruce and I said what Walt had done. And he said, the heck, you're a state director. I don't even know you, and you're not a member of MUFON. So he said, come visit me and we'll talk. And we did that. And Bruce assigned me to a very great gentleman named James Cross, which was a Air Force captain, Korean War veteran. And I learned the ropes working. He was a photo analyst. So I learned the ropes investigation, how to do it the proper way with Jim Cross. And then I went on years later, became friends with a mutual friend we have. I call her my sister, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, and we formed the first mutual. There you go. That's Deb, many years ago and not so long ago. But we formed a mutual UFO dive team and actually in Missouri, taught divers to respond to cases if we had investigations in the water, because 2/3 of UFO cases in some way are related to water. And we learned that. And Deb went on to do a very great book, Alien Colonization of Earth's Waterways. And I urge everybody to get that book. It's a wonderful, the documentation and that is great. But that's how I got into the Mutual UFO Network. And through that, through Bruce Whitteman, I often attended Ted Phillips lectures, and Bruce had him in St. Louis, and I talked to Bruce and we got to be friends, and Ted. And Ted offered me a position to help him with the electrical at first. I was an electrician, electrical engineer by trade. And first couple of years, I was putting up security cameras, running wires out in Marley Woods project. And but that's how it all started with Ted.
Yeah. How fantastic is that? He sounds like an amazing guy. Unfortunately, we lost him, but from everything I hear about him and his work, super credible, and what an honor to be able to be mentored by him. And I have Debbie Ziegelmeyer's book, by the way. It's right over here on my shelf. It's a beautiful book. I highly recommend anybody go to Amazon and check it out. And I agree. I mean, Missouri as a whole, you have a lot of water there. Can you talk a little bit about some of the dives that you have done and maybe some water encounters out there?
We never had much success in our dives. We were scheduled so many times in the past. Debbie and I were scheduled to do dives, and I'm not speaking anything nefarious or anything happened to stop us, but we were scheduled to do some dives back, in about, I'd say 2003, 4. We were going to go to Shag Harbor. We had some dives planned in Puerto Rico. There was a real active site there, and we had contact. We were working a little bit with Heidi Hollis in that, and but there always seemed to be something in the really big cases where we could have had some payback. It always looked like somebody put their hand in the pot and put an end to it. So, and there over the years, as you probably are aware of, and Debbie will tell you back up, and in Missouri, we've had a lot of interaction with, let's just say, in some cases, personally, myself with the DOD, and and Bruce Whitteman and we worked in some cases that we were lucky enough in 2004. Bruce was contacted at that time, and that's where I can get into disclosure. But I will say at this point, disclosure's never going to happen the way people think it is. Bruce was contacted by members in the DOD and a guy that we knew, and it gets X-Filish as you can imagine, but Bruce was offered a chance. They were going to have a press conference. They chose the first, of course, Mutual UFO Network was started in Missouri, so they chose Bruce, and Bruce asked me to accompany him and members of the press, and we were going to go to Area 51. We went there. That same week, it was called off. Skip ahead about 3 months. We were promised a press conference, and we actually went to Quantico, just like a movie. We sat at the end of a long table for 4 hours waiting for a press conference. Our handler, name was Red, our government handler, he came out and informed us that it was off. And of course, they did that to Rod Serling. They did that to Walt Disney, several other producers they've done that with. But we went through that process, and I will tell you that our contact with Red, he did share a lot of things personally with us, and I can speak about them now, it's not what you think it is, believe me. One of the things he informed us was disclosure was not going to happen the way you think it is. It's going to happen through downloads from back engineering. And he said, when you think of disclosure, that equals AI, artificial intelligence. So that gives you a hint in that. And the religious aspect of it, I wasn't prepared for, coming from the man that we were dealing with. So it really took us by surprise. And as the man we were in contact with, he told us after we were disappointed, nothing occurred. And I've seen it all my life. Started in '69 as a young boy, and I've seen disclosure promised so many times, but it's not going to happen the way people think it is going to happen. But it was just, we went around in circles with these people, believe me. And they explained to us, our handler said, he said, well, Tom, it's like this. He said, there's two parties in this disclosure. He said, the old regime they don't feel they're going to force feed this to anybody. They don't feel it's their duty and obligation. They think there's enough information out there. You can get it on your own. And the young regime wants it all out to the public. But unfortunately, the old regime signs the paychecks, and that's just the way it is. So
you sent me a very cryptic kind of message from Bruce Witterman. Can I play that right now with any luck, if this will play without glitching? But I find it really compelling, and I think this is kind of what you're speaking of, right? I mean, so let me add this to the stage here. See if we can get this to play with any luck here. It's pretty short, so hopefully we can get through it.
I was honored to know several things that will never, ever be given to the public, but it's all right. Get into the subject matter and you can learn this stuff. Tom Ferrario is a good friend of mine also. And Ted had a great, great helper. And I think he's going to do very well with it.
So he is speaking there of, and I tend to agree with you. I can remember years ago, when Lou Elizondo first hit the stage and said we'd be having a fundamentally different conversation a year from now, it kind of hit me that he necessarily wasn't talking about nuts and bolts craft or ETs or UFOs, but the fundamental of reality of itself and nature itself. Is that kind of what you're kind of hinting to as far as what disclosure may look like as far as AI? Is it just how we view reality itself? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, the first thing I'd like him, if I leave anybody with anything, the one thing I'd like to leave them with is that, and believe me, this steps on the toes of a lot of ufologists. I've lost a lot of close friends over this. But I will tell you that coming from Ted Phillips, who worked with Alan Hynek, a very great gentleman, you may have heard of Ray Stanford, was good friends with me, and so many others. Stanton Freeman was a good friend, and they all came away. That's Ray Stanford there. Yeah. He was so incredibly, we just lost him shortly a while back. And he wrote the Secordal Saucer in the Pentagon Pantry. He ran Project Starlight for the government, the first government's attempt to use laser targeting on cameras, and had incredible success, but it was all hushed up. But Ray was an incredible man. And but the one thing all these people I came away with was that they all come to believe, and we proved it with Jacques Vallée. There's another name, thanks to Ted Phillips, I was exposed to and became friends with at Marley. He worked out with us in Marley. And it doesn't get any better than Jacques Vallée, believe me. And Douglas Trumbull was out there. But Jock and everybody came away, and they proved it in so many ways at Marley and at Skinwalker the first. We were working, I can say it now, Robert Bigelow came out, was working with us at Marley for a short period, and Colm Keller. And but I will tell you that the one impression that they all know and they proved was it is all interdimensional. It's not interplanetary. And as you know, von Braun, the rocket scientist, said, the last false flag will be the alien portrayal, and they're not coming to, they're not aliens, believe they're interdimensional beings, and the craft are interdimensional. And when I say that, people say, you don't believe in life on other planets. I say, no, I absolutely do. But Stanton Friedman proved it to me that because of the law of physics that apply on our side, it's all interdimensional. We're never going to have craft coming here from Alpha Centauri. You know, even Alan Hynek said it's more complex than little green guys coming here from Alpha Centauri. But like Stan, and believe me, he was a great man and physicist. And like Stan told me, he said, he asked what I was a Star Trek, I was a Trekkie. And there's Stan. We spent so much time together, and Ted. And Stan was a wonderful man. But he asked me one day he knew I loved Star Trek. And I said, yeah, I was a Trekkie. And he asked me what I thought about that. And I told Stan, I said, well, we don't have the capability yet, but we will. And Stan said, he said, no, Tom. He said, we're not. He said, you do realize, he said, to take the object a size of a pea to attain light speed would take the combined energy output of the Earth for 100 years. Now, do you think it's practical we're going to have a starship? So I wasn't going to argue with Stan. And I said, no, but they did teach me that when you go interdimensional, you have access to everything and anything, but you have to be able to transgress that interdimensional boundary. And right now, we have limited capability of that with craft that were here, and actually remains a craft that they reassembled in a couple intact vessels that we have capability. But unfortunately, the elements to make a fleet of these craft, there's 3 elements. One in particular is only on the other side of the dimensional boundary. So that's why we can't make a fleet of these things. And believe me, when they're here, and when they're not. And this goes into the paranormal, cryptids, structured craft, light ball activity, and so much of what they're dealing with at Skinwalker now, I will tell you, is what we dealt with in Marley. And I was in touch with the producer. We were going to do work on the first Skinwalker, and that didn't happen either. Again, it didn't work out, but they're great people there. And I wish we would have had the means and the machinery and the equipment they have. Believe me, we could have done so much more, but we were dated.
Yeah. Right. So Tom, you talk about, and I agree with you completely. I mean, through all my years of research too, I'm led to almost the same conclusion you have found yourself in, that, you talk about it being frequency driven. And I would love for you to just kind of give our audience a little background on Marley Wood. What kind of activities do you have there? I know you mentioned cattle mutilations and the cryptids. What types of cryptids? And do you think they all kind of, I mean, certainly frequency driven, it would explain a lot of all that, the UFOs to the cryptids to the paranormal. So let's first kind of talk about that. What types of cryptids are seen there at Marley Woods, and types of craft and things like that?
Yeah, it goes the full spectrum. We have structured craft, we had light ball activity, and Ted always felt, as our technologies advanced, that they covered their tail, they lowered their risk factor by moving from the structured craft into the light ball technology as their ROV, or they use natural elements. In some cases, we found they even use water, which that sounds so strange, I know, but they used in the light ball activity it goes into a science. The coloration of the light balls determines the amount of energy that they expel. And we found the blue and white seemed to be the more benign. When you got into the yellow, orange, and the red especially, you were dealing with a good amount of energy, and they were the guys that were the precursor to what we called the unseen force on Marley. And the unseen force knocked down gates, knocked down people, injured people. And besides that activity, the unseen force, we had cattle mutilation, horse mutilation, and I brought in a very good friend of mine, which unfortunately we just lost. I lost another friend, Christopher O'Brien. And I don't know if you knew Chris or not, but he was a great guy. Years ago, I had a radio show on a little radio station out here, and when Bruce would have him speak in St. Louis, I'd have him on my little radio show once a month, the MUFON Hour. And Chris actually stayed in my house a couple times. And but Chris looked over Ted's documentation on the cattle mutilation and horse mutilation. It was exactly what he had experienced in San Luis Valley, and I see, I can't but help notice behind you, Snippy the horse. He was involved with that, and Linda Moulton House. So we had the experts, believe me, at the time out there. And it just, unfortunately, that it never worked out to where we wanted a full-time presence out there. And we thought the Bigelow team would give us that. And but Ted virtually lived the rest of his life out there. And he was so devoted to the project because, as Ted said, all his life he was chasing breadcrumbs. But that was the first time he actually started witnessing live himself. And it impressed him so much. But we had Bigfoot sightings out there. We had one of the biggest cryptids we had was and this sounds so strange, a 400-pound plus polar bear / sloth animal that we do have 2 photographs of. They're very poor. It did leave physical trace. And that's the other thing I'd like to impress with people is that when the cryptids come across, they're interdimensionally frequency driven. When they're on this side, they're as real as you and I. They lay down physical trace, but when they're not here, they're not here. And that includes Bigfoot. And the cryptids have the ability to go back and forth, transgress the interdimensional boundary, where the structural craft, they have to use their technology to do this. But we did have, we found 16-inch white long hairs on the fence, barbed wire fence, where the one property owner had actually shot at this animal, claimed he had made it red. And we did microscopy on this, very crude in the day DNA work, and it came back with no known match. So there you have physical trace. And I will tell you, we've had possible abduction, one, classic 30-foot disc landing, crop circles, saucer nest is what they used to refer to as a crop circle, when there was a disc in conjunction with a disc, a circle put down. A crop circle was a saucer nest, was the terminology. And Ted got on us about proper terminology, believe me. And with his scientific background, we had to prove everything 2 or 3 ways, or we wouldn't speak about it. And
I kind of stole this great little 3-minute Ted Phillips video about his early work. And you actually, in that video, it's really cool. You mentioned the Snippy over the shoulder, and Chris O'Brien. Yes, I knew him. He was a wonderful guy and did a lot of work out here in the San Luis Valley. In fact, he was going to help us with this project along with Linda right before his passing. But I want to show this video, this 3-minute video, if we can get through it, of Ted Phillips. But I also want to talk to you about Chris's book, The Tricksters, and the trickster element out there at Marley Woods. So first, let's try and run this little video here. Hopefully it'll play it, because I thought it was cool, because one of the images shows some of the trace evidence and the marks in the ground from the Snippy case. There was so much more to that case, the APRA files were just acquired by David Marler. So we kind of reopened that back up. And there was so much more to that than most people knew about. And so much ties to the work that Ted Phillips did and you do yourself. And, I think my big message to get out there to people, and I think it's similar to you as well, Tom, is that it's not too late to go back and look at all these old historical cases, because we know so much more now. And there's so many more connections that can be made. So let's see if we can run this little clip right here. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
Ted Phillips of Sedalia, Missouri, seen here examining a UFO-affected area, is acknowledged as the world expert.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just need to get some better uplink. Ah, it's so frustrating. This is show number 4 for me, and every week we try to improve it, and we thought we had it handled, but unfortunately, back to the drawing board. I live up here behind Pikes Peak in the Rocky Mountains. We have Starlink, and it does fine, downloading things. It's just uploading. So unfortunately, but it's a great clip which shows Ted Phillips really looking at trace evidence. He looks at the Socorro case, which you mentioned, Ray Stanford and the work he did out there. And I guess Ted Phillips worked on that case as well. Is that right? With J. Allen Hynek?
Yes. Yeah. Ted was there with J. Allen Hynek, and Ray Stanford was there. And I will tell you that it's so fortunate that Lonnie Zamoras was there when he did the wives thing. And there was actually they tried to do a cover up on that and had Lonnie Zamoras, the patrolman that had found the craft, had he not called in the state police and had those witnesses there and people, and a friend of his that was a sheriff's deputy, it would have probably got covered up. But because of them, it was investigated, it got out, and Ted and Hynek did and Ray Stanford did a great story on that, of course. And there's actually some present work being done on that yet. And it was so great that Ted took our team out on one of our trips. We actually went out to Socorro, and he retraced his steps out there. And believe it or not, out there in the desert, which of course there's things built up around it now that weren't there when Ted was there. But we went and they had encircled the landing pad imprints in the desert with a ring of rocks. And Ted actually we dug through a little brush, and Ted actually found the original circles of rock where the indentations were. So it was really great to be out there with Ted and seeing it through his eyes, the original, it didn't get any fresher than that through Ted's eyes. And, but it was really great to get there. And we from there, we went with Stanton, and we went to the Aztec, New Mexico crash site. We investigated that with Stan and some other people. And, but I would tell you that that was an incredible case that they covered. And,
yeah, I mean, it's so in that video, I wish we could have shown it, but people say, well, there's no evidence or proof to some of these UFO landings or site when really we have quite a bit. I mean, even, the more obscure, cases out there in Medicine Bow, Wyoming, going through the Dr. Leo Sprinkles, there are so many photographs of trace evidence on the ground. And I know Ted really looked into a lot of that. These circles on the ground, things that are left at animal mutilations and that. So, it's about time that researchers, investigators really look at all of this ground trace evidence and start really making catalogs of this, even from, decades back. And I think that the work that these pioneers did in the past is just invaluable, and it's still very relevant today. So it's interesting too. You talk about gray cryptids in this big, huge, what did you say, 300-400 pound white-haired sloth type creature was actually something that was reported out here at Rocky Mountain Ranch too. They called them the white fuzzies, this gray hair. And it's so fascinating to me that you actually were able to collect the hairs from the barbed wire fence and get it tested. There were reports of that in APRO out here as well, and it came back inconclusive. So, we do have these type of reports, and it's so important that people are aware of this.
yes.
Do you believe, obviously, I think you're spot on. These cryptids will come out or come up or materialize out of whatever realm or portal, if you want to call them that, and they can leave trace evidence and then they disappear. But they also have this trickster element, or the phenomena does. Can you kind of talk about that and maybe some of the trickster things that happened out there at Marley Woods?
Yeah, the Native Americans, and it is the Osage Indians, that were the tribe along near Marley Woods and on Marley Woods at the time. And unfortunately, there's no Native American, indigenous people there now. So we didn't have any way. Ted tried to get any kind of records of them on the property. We couldn't find any. We did find artifacts in the later years where they did have encampments at Marley. So they did have a presence, we know, on there. And but the Native Americans refer to them as the tricksters, and because of what they did, and the ghost of the woods. If they wanted to be seen, they would be seen. If they didn't want to be seen, you're not going to find them. You could go through a forest with hand to hand with 1,000 men, and they're not there. Now that doesn't mean they're not there. They can go. We truly have proved that when they're on the other side, the interdimensional boundary, they can still see what's here. And that's one thing, I'd like people to come away with also, that so many times in the paranormal, and even at Skinwalker in the early days, they wanted to know why none of their experiments would turn out the way they did, or why they couldn't get ahead of the intelligence out there. And they're having that problem to this day. Well, what we had come to find out was that the reason they're always ahead of you is because they're always observing you. They're always there observing you. They know exactly what your plans are, what you're doing, and you can't sense them. You have no idea they're there. So you can't get ahead of something there that's monitoring you. And the tricksters, and we caught proof of this in so many ways out there. And even Bigelow's team, we performed some similar experiments, and more, here again, the paranormal type. And it gets into like when Jacques Vallée and Douglas Trumbull was out at Marley, and Douglas had built a piece of camera equipment that was very expensive at the time. There's other cameras that do the work now, but back then, this piece of equipment was self-operated, motion detection and infrared, and it would hone in on objects and identify it. But it was in a rain one night, and Douglas didn't want to put this out in the weather right away. So there's an old cabin at Marley. He decided we were going to lock it in. So that night we all went in there. We locked. Jacques Vallée was with us. We locked it at the front northern window on a very tripod that probably weighed 65 pounds, and the camera probably weighed another 45, 50 pounds.
We're big back then, right?
Yeah, locked the tripod. The property owner locked the door to the cabin, and we went back where we stayed in the newer building they built for Ted, his research. And the next morning we started in. Of course, Douglas was the first one to go in, and we hear Douglas. I can't use the language he used that morning, but he goes in, and of course Jacques asked. He said, "What's the matter, Douglas?" And he said, "Somebody is screwing with me in here. Who was in this room?" And the property owner had the only key, and he went home, and we were there. We didn't even have a key to that cabin. But anyway, the camera, which was at the window, locked down, was turned 35 degrees away from the window into the cabin. Now, we had so much poltergeist type activity in that cabin, which I know you know about personally, that sort of thing. And you can't explain it. And one experiment we did that Bigelow recreated, and this sounds boring and mundane as heck, but they took normal common objects on a tabletop where this activity would happen, put high-speed cameras on a tabletop with just common things like a deck of playing cards, cigarette lighter, and that sort of thing, car keys, and had 3 high-speed cameras which could well catch the fastest projectile bullet in flight, to the degree you could do microscopy on the photo of the bullet. That's how well these cameras could slow this and take the image. Put this on the tabletop. In the morning, they'd come in. The keys would all be all the objects would be in different locations. The camera would catch the objects in their set new positions, but would never catch the objects in motion. Now, the better minds than mine had proved mathematically that the only way this could take place, and this comes in the realm of paranormal so well, these objects had to go interdimensional, and reattain its position, go interdimensional, come back in that position, and be found in that locality. So that was just one of the ways they proved that this was interdimensionally done. And we have so many other instances of that, you know, like you mentioned, the tricksters. We had one morning, it was light snow, a light freeze. The property owner goes on one of his ponds where they watered cattle. There was a light ice on it, snow. He sees 13-inch, 3-toed tracks, which I know that probably rings a bell with you. But an object of considerable mass, you know, to have a footprint that size, going out into the pond on the light snow, terminating in the center of the pond, ending. And the property owner went to examine this, and he stepped on the edge of the ice. He broke through to his knee. Now, we do believe this thing, whatever it was in the state of transition, going interdimensionally. That's the only thing could explain this. To have that much mass and weight.
Yeah, he didn't break through to the ice. It was just the prints.
Yeah, the property owner did, and but you know the creature, whatever it was, got out and terminated. The tracks were laid down one directional. It was starting to cross the pond and terminated, ended in the middle of the pond. So
that's crazy.
How do you explain that? You know,
you really can't explain that. That's crazy.
But we have so much of that.
Yeah, Tom, do you have any theories on why the tricksters like to mess with us in this way? I mean, taking keys and hiding things. And I mean, we hear this all the time. We see it at Rocky Mountain. We see it at Skinwalker. We see it at all these locations. Are they just getting their kicks? I mean, what are your theories about that? What's going on there?
That drove Ted crazy because he tried to come up with some line of thought that could explain this. And, you know, it got back to one, you know, was it a form of communication? He never really thought that to be the case because they could have communicated so many other easier ways. And when you get into the horse mutilation and the cattle mutilation and even deer mutilations we had in Marley, Ted came away with one thing, that it generated great amounts of fear. And that we truly believe they use fear as a tool, whether they feed on it or they use it for a tool to manipulate people. And believe me, some of the extreme cases like our horse mutilation out there, the amount of fear it generated in that area was tremendous. And it did manipulate people, believe me. But and for what purpose other than that could it be, you know, would it be done? So
that's such an interesting theory. I've never thought of it that way. I always thought, oh, maybe they're just getting a good laugh or having fun, or, you know, you think a trickster, jokester, jester, all that. But you're right. If they feed off our fear and they're truly trying to make us afraid, obviously the mutilations do that. Can you tell our listeners, I know it's a little graphic, so warning ahead of time, this horse mutilation that you're speaking of is pretty graphic and different than anything I've really heard before. Can you kind of walk us through what happened there and what evidence was left behind there? Because it's pretty brutal.
I like to always warn people at that point. It's pretty graphic, but I'll encapsulate it as briefly as I can. But basically, the property owner on site 2 came down from his home, walked by his horse barn. He had his favorite horse in the one stall. He used to feed it some sugar in the morning. He went in, fed it sugar, closed the gate. Everything was fine. He had a habit. He'd run the fence line, check the fence line. The whole time this occurred, he was within earshot and eyesight of this. And you're speaking about maybe 15, 25 minutes at the most. As he came back past the barn, he noticed the gate was ajar. And when he walked over to the barn, he instantly knew that he couldn't believe his eyes. He described it as a slaughterhouse, and the man had owned actually a meat processing plant too and a dairy. So he knew what that was like, but he said it was worse than a slaughterhouse. He said there were pieces of horse flesh, chunks on the rafters, on the fence, on the gate, on the walls. There was blood all over. And it just looked like this horse had exploded. And Ted had come across this, believe it or not, he'd come across this occurrence before. And in one instance, it was out of the United States he did, and that's another story. But Ted always said it looked like this horse had been put in a microwave oven and just exploded. We got out there. Again, we didn't have a permanent presence. We got out there about 3 weeks, I believe it was, later. We did soil analysis. We took samples. Unfortunately, the farmer had taken the big remains of his horse with a neighbor and burned it, which I understand. We did get some flesh, some samples, blood samples, sent him in to Phyllis Budinger, which was Ted's go-to laboratory gal. It was great. She was a great aide to Ted through the years, and came back, no explosives, nothing out of the ordinary, no chemical traces of anything. So the only thing they can imagine this did, and Ted said, I know it has a signature of microwave radiation, and we did experience that out there ourselves at times in another phenomenon called the light beam, which it injured ranchers, it injured Ted and I still live with some of the effects of an injury from that to this day. So we do believe, as they're finding out, and they believe in Skinwalker now, the microwave element of this is the bad guy. That's what does the damage. So
yeah, I think definitely you and others are onto something there with the microwaves. And can you talk about what this light beam was and what you observed it doing?
Yeah, there was through the years out there, it wasn't uncommon at times for the ranchers to see a brilliant white light beam come down from the sky. And here again, it sounds strange. I know, no structured craft, nothing in the air, but just this light beam would come down and hit the timber, go across the timber, back and forth hunting in the fields like it was searching for something. And in one case, Adam Johnson and myself, which Adam was one of Ted's team members, he evolved into a very great producer. He's done work for Sci-Fi Channel and other things. Adam and I were in a deer stand one night monitoring the field, which had another phenomenon out there called the twinkle lights, which lit up the field at night. And we were trying to get photography of that. And it was like 20 degrees, and we were up there for like 4 hours. And believe me, when you're out that long and that it's cold, it gets to you. And we decided to close up shop. And unfortunately, we put all our cameras up. And I noticed coming out of the southwest, a beam of light hitting the treetops. And Adam was just trying to get trying to get the cameras back out to film this. And it came across a 7-acre field, came down and hit the field, came across the field right to the bottom where our deer stand was. And just as it got to the bottom of our deer stand, it is extinguished. It was out. It was gone. And we were in radio communication with Ted, and he was close proximity. He should have seen that. He didn't. And then through the years, other ranchers have had this actually on them. And then the bad case was when Ted and I were coming home one night about 3 in the morning. And as people in this business know, 12 a.m. is not the bewitching hour. Usually 3 a.m. is when things start, I'll tell you. And we were coming back in my vehicle on a dirt road, off a gravel road, off a paved road, all locked, fenced in area. Nothing could get in there, nothing out. And we were driving back to Site 2. And I noticed in my rearview mirror a light coming up behind us. And I knew it couldn't be a vehicle. And just as I was watching, it overtook our vehicle. It just like, I hate to draw the analogy to Close Encounters, but that's what it was. It came down on our vehicle. We could see the dashboard, the vents in my car like never before. And Ted and I reacted probably unwisely. We both jumped out of the vehicle, looked up, and in the light, and we seen the light, as Ted described it, retracting. And I know a little bit about lighting, and I don't know how you could recreate this. And even some of the people with UFO Witness, their tech guys couldn't duplicate this, but it retracted. You could see a definite cutoff end of the light, and it retracted into like a old camera twisting reflex motion into the sky, and then it was gone. We seen no craft, nothing. And we drove back to Ted's office where we stayed. Ted got out. He actually got sick. He vomited. I felt fine that night. We were there another couple of days, and we went back home, and I started having scalp problems. I went to my local rural doctor, and he thought it was shingles. It wasn't. He tested. He just said, you got some kind of a burn on your head, and actually gave me opiates for pain. It hurt so bad I couldn't even touch my hair. And then later I developed a cyst in my eye, and then I had cataracts removed, and it was touch and go with keeping my vision in one eye, but luckily they restored it, and then also as a byproduct of that, and I have documented proof of this. I have photos before and after. My hair at that time was dark brown, and within a couple of months, it went to white to blondish to what it is today. So,
right. I mean, that's something a lot of people don't want to talk about. I mean, maybe because of liability issues and that, but these ill health effects, and we certainly found evidence of that out there in the San Luis Valley as well. People going blinded, losing their vision. So this is not the first time I've heard this happen, even with the burning of the scalp and, the radiation burns. It sounds like that could be possibly what happened to you, Tom. I mean, that's scary. Even on the Rocky Mountain Ranch, we're getting some ill health effects, and it's just a side effect. Do you think that is radiation? Is it something else? Is it microwaves? Can microwaves hurt you in that kind of way, or?
I'm so thankful. When I had my macular cyst removed, which is about 3 times harder to do than cataracts, you got an extremely good outcome, or you can lose vision. They did a great job on it, but on the final visit to my eye doctor in St. Louis, and I got this all documented, I asked the young doctor that removed my bubble and checked my vision, and I said, what causes this? And he said, well, usually it's old age, and that at that time it wasn't old age, I can tell you, but have you ever seen this before? And the young eye doctor said, the only time I've ever seen this, and I'm so thankful, I talked to him and asked him that. He said, the only time I've ever seen this happen was in younger people. There were 2 cell phone tower workers. One of them was back up on there. They installed some equipment. They fired the cell tower up. He was exposed to great amounts of microwave energy, and he had the same thing that I had. Now, when I went back and told Ted that confirmed Ted's suspicion that this was microwave in origin. So that, and, but that was just a gift that we got that confirmed the microwave played a part in this.
That sounds like it. And do you have any theories on what they might be searching for at this particular location? I mean, did you ever get any clues? Is there anything unusual there? Are there aquifers there? Are there water features on Marley Woods? Is it highly electromagnetic like in some of these other areas?
That drove Ted crazy also. He studied the topography. He thought that some of the locals thought these things were coming in and out of the ground. We studied. There were no caves on Marley. There's some large cave complexes within 8-10 miles of Marley, which we felt some of them maybe did run under Marley, but we could find no entrance or any exit on Marley of this. But he didn't rule that out. But Ted, we did all kind of, analysis, electrical, EMF, and we came up with nothing, tri-field meters at the time. And of course, the technology, back then was not what they have now. I wish we'd have had some of that. And I have taken some more up-to-date equipment. When we shot with UFO Witness, I had some microwave equipment there because I felt it my responsibility to protect these people when we were there. And 3 times, so we got that on the episode of UFO Witness. And, 1 a.m. in the morning out there, no power lines, no homes, nothing. My microwave detection equipment had an audible and a visual light cue, and 3 times it went into from the green, yellow, into red, just for about a second or two. And that happened 3 times. We got that on film. And now something caused that. I actually feel in my mind it was the intelligence letting us know, or letting me know, it was still there and capable of doing what it did before, and it was in charge. And at Skinwalker, it always felt like when they dug out there, they felt that was what initiated the bad guy or the bad results. And at Marley, it seemed like when we brought in strangers, the intelligence didn't like strangers out there. It kind of
it's interesting because you mentioned, the phenomenon, whatever it is, whatever its motivation is, it seems to affect different people in different ways. You mentioned, somebody vomiting and that you felt fine. What do you think why is that? Do you have any theories on that? Why it might attract to others?
Ted studied the microwave issue damage back even into the early military radar days when, they had individuals exposed to high microwave radiation and radar, which your microwave ovens have come from that technology. First time a technician had a chocolate bar in his pocket and was exposed, it melted the chocolate bar. That's how your microwave oven started. But the thing we learned was each individual, you have a moisture content in your makeup of your body. And that seems to be the most prominent factor on damage in a human being. That if your moisture content is higher than mine, you're going to be damaged worse than I am, or in a different way. So little things like that you wouldn't even dream of that can affect why one person walks away and another person gets hit pretty hard, or in a different way. So
that makes sense. And we're all resonating differently, frequency driven too, right? All our frequencies are different. So maybe some people are vibrating higher and lower. Did you ever have any strange hum sounds or noises or bangs reported out there at Marley?
Personally, I had never experienced the sounds. The property owners did. And low frequency modulation and which is really strange. I'm not there now, and I don't claim it to be a hitchhiker effect. I think there's something else going on, but I experience that now at my home where no one else does. And no, it has been noted there, and people have had that experience. And Ted came away with some of that, and Ted actually experienced going home with what is known as the hitchhiker effect occurrences and feeling like something, the intelligence follows them home, and there again in the paranormal mode, So, but I will tell you that it's so much more involved than just structured craft, and than people have any clue. And I will tell you that the government knows it through the contacts we had, and I still have a couple. And they always tell me when I do a show, when I speak about the religious aspect of it and what we learned from our contact Red, they always tell me, he said, Tom, you make a habit of sailing in treacherous waters. And I tell people that, and he said, well, is that a threat? And I said, well, I've already talked to a certain individual, and I've got nothing but with Ted, our work out there. And so, I can't pull a piece of wreckage out of my file cabinet or anything like that. So, but it does happen. And we did have people in St. Louis, Missouri, researchers. I will tell you that bad things do happen to good people sometimes. So,
yeah. That's true. Your light is flickering behind your shoulder there, Tom. So I don't know if it always flickers like that or if that's paranormal or hitchhiker in nature. But we only have 5 minutes left. This hour just flew by with you. And we could do a deep dive on each one of these topics, whether it's, the lights, the spotlights, the fairy lights, if you like to call them, to the cryptids, all of these things. But for the last 5 minutes, I would like to just kind of talk to you about where are you able to do any more research at Marley Woods? What is the future plans for that? What does that look like? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, what we're trying to do, Ted's got a very unique office where he kept all his files over the years. And it's not in Marley Woods, of course. It's in another location, of course, has to be, anonymous. But we're working with people, and some of our old team members were getting a documentary / movie together we've been working on for years, and it'll be monumental. And Adam worked with Douglas Trumbull for years, which it doesn't get any better. And that name may not mean much anymore to people, but if you've ever watched Close Encounters, Third Kind, 2001 Space Odyssey, Brainstorm, and on, Douglas was the one that did all the special effects on that and was very interested in UFOs. He had some personal experiences. So, but unfortunately, Douglas passed away, and more and more out of all the old timers, and I can't believe I'm 70 now. I cannot believe it, because I was, when I started all this in 69, I never thought I'd live this long, to be honest. But all the people that I've worked with, Stan, Ted, Ray Stanford, Chris O'Brien, and on and on and on, I'm about the only one left. So.
I hear you. I know it's so sad. We're losing so many great pioneers in the field. And I just think it's so important that all this great work just gets passed down and preserved. So that's a good message for all of you investigators and research out there. Make plans for your collections, goodness sakes.
Yes.
I know with Chris O'Brien, it's frustrating because I don't know what happened to his decades of work, and it's super unfortunate. So I hope somehow that surfaces and gets someplace where it needs to be. But I think the work is so important and shows, like beyond Skinwalker and Skinwalker Ranch. I know Skinwalker Ranch tends to get a lot of the notoriety, but there's so many places, not only in the United States, but around the world. And that's what I just really liked about the Beyond, because they're looking at all of these other high-strangeness locations. And Marley Woods is obviously right there at the tippy top of these high-strangeness locations and has been researched for decades now. And it's such an important piece to the puzzle. And I really respect and admire the work that you've done there, and Ted Phillips has done, and Jacques, and all of these greats, Chris and everybody. So thanks to all of them, and thank you to you for all your work that you've done and continue to do. Are you still active there too with Debbie? And I hear there's maybe rumors of the dive team getting back together and that. So I hope that that's the case.
Probably not the dive team. I tried to do some diving this last weekend, and I found out how rusty I was, and I had a hip replacement, and I do rather well, but not near what I used to be, and wouldn't get to the depth we used to do. Debbie did do an Alaskan Triangle the series was on. She did some incredible deep dives there in cold water, tech dives, 120 foot, and diving down on some objects they thought was there. So, Debbie's still an instructor and does it. I was a dive master, but I've kind of given that up. But the only thing I'd like to leave people with, one thought: when you get out investigating this, always know that it's dimensionally based. That's one. I know a lot of people will argue with that, but if I had to put my money on anything, the people I worked with, that's the one thing, commonality fact that I know. It's interdimensional. And when it comes here, it's very real. And here's the kicker, though. You have the authority on this side to control it. But if you give that away, just calling upon it like a Ouija board, a seance, you're giving it the authority to be here. And
That's right.
But it's very real, believe me. And it's kind of like here again, the Star Trek day, was kind of like the prime directive. I truly believe we were put on this side not to be interfered with. And what comes across doesn't have the authority to be here at times. And that's it in a nutshell. So be careful with what you're dealing with.
That's a great way to end this show. I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Thanks so much again for being there, and be careful what you wish for. And if you open anything up, make sure you close that and always have really good intentions, because you're right. You don't know what you're given permission to enter. And so be careful with that. And thank you again for being here. You're a great guest. I learned a lot from your interview here. It was really informative. So I hope to have you back on in the future. And have a great rest of your week, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next Wednesday night. Bye-bye.